The negotiation chamber aboard the Clithery flagship Eternal Reckoning was colder than any place Elias Marrow had ever stood. Frost rimed the edges of the black crystal viewport behind the delegation table, the air recyclers hissed like distant serpents. Dim violet bioluminescence pulsed from veins in the walls, casting every face in shades of bruise and shadow. 12 Clithery overlords sat in a perfect crescent, their segmented carapaces gleaming like wet obsidian, mandibles locked in expressions of glacial patience. Across from them, the Terran delegation, 6 diplomats in crisp concordance blacks, looked small, soft, mortal. Elias stood at the rear wall among the security detail, hands clasped behind his back, eyes forward. He was not supposed to speak. He was not supposed to be noticed. Junior Cultural Liaison, barely cleared for Level 3 access, assigned mostly because someone higher up had decided a human face needed to be visible when the Clithery demanded a hostage as guarantee of the treaty's good faith. The treaty itself lay projected in the center of the table, a shimmering lattice of clauses written in 3 scripts: Human Standard, Clithery Glyph Script, and the neutral mathematical pidgin both sides could pretend to trust. Mutual non-aggression. Demilitarized buffer zones. Technology sharing protocols. Trade corridors reopened after 30 years of Cold War. All of it balanced on a single, ancient clause buried in paragraph 47, c. A living hostage of equivalent diplomatic weight shall be exchanged and held in good condition until the first compliance audit cycle completes, 5 standard years hence. The hostage shall be of the bloodline or appointed proxy of the signing authority. The Clithery had already named theirs. Third daughter Vexthera Reall, 11th in the line of succession, barely passed her 3rd molt. She sat at the far end of their crescent, small even by veiled standards, her adolescent carapace still carrying the faint rainbow sheen of youth. Forearms folded tight against her thorax in the posture of perfect composure, 6 compound eyes fixed on nothing and everything at once. She had not moved since the session began 4 hours ago. Not a twitch. Not a breath out of rhythm. The humans had stalled for 2 of those hours. Ambassador Hale, gray-haired, voice like worn velvet, had tried every diplomatic feint in the manual: health concerns, familial objections, precedent from the Arcturon Accords of 2187. The Clithery had answered each with the same flat, clicking reply. The clause is non-negotiable. A hostage. Of equivalent weight. Or there is no treaty. Elias had watched Hale's shoulders sag millimeter by millimeter. Watched the other diplomats exchange glances that grew steadily more hopeless. Watched the silence stretch until it felt like a physical weight pressing against his ribs. Then Ambassador Hale spoke the words everyone had been dreading. We have not yet identified a suitable candidate from the diplomatic bloodlines. The Council on Earth is still deliberating. We request an extension of the lead overlord. Vraxus Thalketh, the same towering nightmare who had once glassed the colony at Epsilon Indi, cut him off with a single mandible snap. Deliberation is concluded. You will name the hostage now, or the treaty collapses and we return to open hostilities. The swarm does not wait. Hale opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked down at the projection as though the clauses might rearrange themselves into mercy. That was when Elias saw her again, really saw her. Reall had not moved, but one of her secondary eyes, the smallest pair, tucked low, had shifted. Just a fraction. Enough to meet his gaze across 30 meters of chilled air and unspoken doom. In that instant the fractured black lenses did not reflect protocol or duty or imperial gravity. They reflected fear. Not the dramatic, humankind wide pupils, trembling lips. This was quieter. Deeper. A faint tremor in the way light bent across the uppermost lenses, a microsecond hesitation in the rhythm of her breathing slits. The fear of a child who understood exactly what 5 years in a human cage meant, even if the cage was called an embassy suite with full diplomatic honors. 5 years away from the only sky she had ever known. 5 years among soft-skinned mammals who smelled of salt and fear sweat. 5 years during which her own people might decide she was expendable after all. Elias felt something crack inside his chest, not anger, not heroism, just a sudden, brutal recognition. He knew that look. He had worn it himself at 16, standing in the corridor outside his mother's hospital room while the monitors flatlined and no one would meet his eyes. He had worn it again at 22, watching the evacuation shuttles lift without him because there was only room for essential personnel. He had worn it every night for the last 3 years when the nightmares came and he woke tasting metal and smoke. He knew what it was to be the one left behind. Before he could think better of it, before Ambassador Hale could find another stall, Elias stepped forward. The security chief hissed his name under his breath. Hale turned, startled. Every clithery eye cluster snapped toward him in perfect unison. Elias stopped 3 paces from the table. "My name is Elias Marrow," he said. His voice sounded too loud in the frozen silence. "Junior Cultural Liaison, Terran Concordance. I volunteer." A ripple passed through both delegations. Human shock, clithery calculation. Hale recovered first. "Mr. Marrow, stand down. This is not." "I'm not married," Elias continued, ignoring him. "No children. No living parents. No siblings in the line of succession or any diplomatic bloodline. I carry no classified implants. My psych profile is stable. Level 4 clearance, annual evals current. I speak fluent glyph script and have completed the full clithery cultural immersion course. If you need a hostage of equivalent weight, I'm it." The lead overlord tilted his head. Mandibles parted just enough to show the inner row of serrated teeth. "You understand what you offer? 5 standard years. In our custody. Subject to our laws. Our medical protocols. Our definition of good condition. I understand. You may not return. The audit cycle could be extended. Your government could default. You would then become property." Elias met the overlord's primary cluster without flinching. "I understand." Lyriel's head lifted a slow, almost imperceptibly. Her secondary eyes locked on him again. This time the tremor in the lenses was different. Not fear. Something closer to disbelief. Ambassador Hale stepped between them. "Elias, stop. You don't have the authority." "I don't need it," Elias said quietly. "The clause says appointed proxy." "I'm appointing myself. Right now. In front of witnesses from both sides." He looked straight at Hale. "Unless you have a better candidate standing by, Ambassador, I suggest you let this happen before the clithery decide we're wasting their time." Hale's mouth worked soundlessly. Behind him, the other diplomats stared, some in horror, some in something dangerously close to relief. The overlord waited exactly 7 heartbeats. Then he clicked once. Sharp, final. Accepted. The projection lattice flared green. Clause 47, C, updated in real time, hostage designated, Elias Marrow, Terran Concordance. Proxy appointments self-declared and witnessed. Lyriel rose. She moved with the careful grace of someone walking across breaking ice. Stopped directly in front of Elias. Close enough that he could smell the faint mineral scent of her carapace, feel the subtle vibration of her breathing slits. She spoke. Soft, crystalline, pitched for his ears alone. "Why?" Elias swallowed once. His throat was dry as ash. "Because I saw your face," he said simply. "And I remembered what it feels like to be the one no one chooses to save." For a moment, barely a second, her upper right hand lifted. Hesitated. Then brushed the back of his knuckles. The lightest touch imaginable. Chitin against skin. Cool. Trembling. Then she turned and walked toward the human delegation. Elias felt the security team close ranks around him. Felt the cold bite of restraint cuffs clicking around his wrists, not roughly, but with professional finality. Felt the overlord gesture toward the rear archway where a squad of clithery warriors waited to escort him to whatever passed for a holding suite aboard a flagship. He did not resist. As they led him away, he looked back once. Lyriel had reached Ambassador Hale. She stood very straight, forearms folded in formal gratitude posture. Hale was speaking to her low, urgent, probably promising every protection the Concordance could offer. But her secondary eyes were still on Elias. Across the lengthening distance. Across the divide of species and treaty in 5 endless years. And in those fractured black mirrors he saw something new flicker behind the fear. Not hope, not yet. But recognition. The same recognition he had felt when their gazes first locked. Someone had seen. Someone had chosen. The archway iris closed behind him with a soft pneumatic sigh. The corridor beyond was dark, cold, endless. Elias walked forward anyway. Head high. Pulse steady. Because sometimes the only strategy that matters is the one that says, not her. Me. And sometimes that single, reckless word, me, is enough to tilt the axis of two civilizations just far enough that mercy becomes possible. The warriors flanked him in perfect silence. Somewhere behind them, in the violet-lit chamber, a treaty was signed. And a human hostage began 5 years of captivity with one small, defiant thought burning brighter than any star. Worth it. 1.6s fast.